something that happened that you probably didn't, unless you were a real fanatic about this sort of coverage. You just didn't know that that the U.S. House of Representatives has stopped a renewal of the FISA law, and I used to know what that meant, but I don't know now. Here to tell us all about it and to fill in the large holes in my introduction is James Czerniawski. He is a senior tech and innovation policy analyst at Americans for Prosperity. Thanks for being with us. So, what was this thing that the description of which I butchered so badly?
Thanks for having me. To go and explain what had happened is that the House basically had a vote on whether or not to go and take up a rule considering a bill that would reauthorize Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And at first glance, the House actually 12 Republicans joined Democrats and voted down this rule because they were not satisfied with the process that had been agreed to. Now, ultimately, fast forward 24 hours later, the House did go and clear this hurdle, and they were able to go and pass a bill. But again, it was passed with actually some really alarming expansions to the surveillance authority that is afforded underneath this program. While it's meant to go and target non-U.S. persons, more often than not, Americans' data gets collected in the process too, violating their Fourth Amendment rights. And that was what was at the crux of the issue here for this debate that we saw going on in the House of Representatives over the last couple of days from last week.
So explain, give an example how this law is used. It's a surveillance law, so pretend something. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So this law is meant to go and help our intelligence agencies collect information and communications on non-U.S. persons, but often it gets abused because there is collection of Americans' data in the process. So really, if you want to see examples of how this program gets abused, there's a litany of well-documented examples since this program was enacted into law. So this power has been abused to go and spy on people who were present at the Capitol for January 6th. This program has been abused to surveil Americans who were protesting during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. This authority has been abused to go and spy on a sitting member of Congress and what we believe was Representative Darren LaHood. This authority has been abused to go and, spy on a sitting judge. It's really been problematic, to say the least. And the broader FISA authority was abused to go and notably spy on President Trump's campaign underneath Title I of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So this thing has been abused widely and egregiously over the years, and it's probably the one bipartisan thing the government loves to do, apparently, is just spy on Americans, no matter what political affiliation that you're on. So this is why you've kind of seen hardcore Republicans like a Chip Roy out of Texas go and work with a very progressive representative in Pramila Jayapal on this issue set, because they both recognize rightly that the government is spying on Americans and violating their Fourth Amendment rights, and that's not acceptable, nor is it tenable.
How do they, if this is supposed to be used for, is it used permission for out of the country or people from out of the country communicating with somebody here, or somebody here communicating with somebody out of the country?
Yeah, that's a great question. So normally this authority is meant to go and collect the communications of non-U.S. persons. Now, the problem is that you could go and be talking to family back home, and there's a web of collection, basically, because data isn't necessarily localized in one spot, right? A person in the United States, their data could also be in the European Union. It could be in, the UAE or some of these other areas. And if we have an interest to go and spy on somebody there, if you had any kind of communication with that person, it might have been even something that was benign, your communications with that individual all of a sudden gets swept under the rug here, and it gets collected as a part of the database, and they can go and query it to look at you if you are a U.S. person here in the United States, even if you have no intention of doing anything wrong to the country, right? And you've done nothing wrong. You're not guilty of anything. You're not conspiring. And your Fourth Amendment rights, your due process rights are being violated because the government has this collection of data that it's got, and they're able to go and buy data from data brokers. And therefore, it's really problematic. It sets up a situation where again, Americans, unbeknownst to them, because you will never know, it's all classified, are having the government possibly surveil them. And this is a power that is meant to be focused on external threats to the country, not internal threats. And that undermines trust in the very institutions that are charged with protecting us, right? So it's a really bad situation to have play out here.
Where do things stand now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, the House is set to go and do final passage of their version of the bill that would reauthorize FISA, and then it will get sent over to the Senate for their consideration. And given that there's a deadline for this Friday, the 19th, to go and get something done, they're going to go and probably put that on a speed run through the Senate. And there's an opportunity there, I think, to go and try to get some changes to the legislation for folks that are alarmed, because there are some really alarming expansions to the surveillance authority that's afforded underneath 702 here. So it's possible that it could get done as soon as the end of this week, but far thing from sure, because there are a lot of people who are upset with how this legislation ultimately goes and expands the surveillance state. It's really not a good spot right now. And I think that many Americans should be worried about this.
I would think that the conversation about this, if there is such a thing, is complicated because of Iran and Israel and all that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Look, it's a scary world out there. There's a lot of stuff going on right now that has people on edge, and none of that's something that we should go and downplay. But I think the reality is that two things can be true. We care about our national security mission here in the United States, and we also care about the Constitution. And we can go and strike a balance that respects Americans' constitutional rights while maintaining our public safety functions that these agencies are responsible for carrying out here. One thing that I know for sure is that the status quo is not acceptable, and the actual expansion of surveillance underneath this bill that's being moved through the House right now is something that Americans definitely aren't signing up for. Again, you have a lot of Americans that have a high level of distrust in the government right now, and it's in no small part due to the fact that they keep getting caught with their hands in the constitutional cookie jar here.
All right, James Czerniawski, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. We appreciate it. Appreciate the update, and maybe we'll talk again. James Czerniawski is a commentator with something called Young Voices. He's Senior Tech and Innovation Policy Analyst at Americans for Prosperity. You're listening to the 956 Drive Home here on 710 KURV.